Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Humphreys, a member of the Kadinago and Creole people of Musketia and a history enthusiast. I'm joined by the Belizean historian Deetra Gillett to slightly scratch the surface with this presentation about the formation of the Creole people and identity in Musketia and Belize. So the Creole people emerged in mainland Musketia before the end of the 17th century when, in 1636, 200 Africans, mainly Angolans, being carried in a Portuguese slave ship by Dutch captains, were left at Cabo Gracias a Dios after around 300 of them were sold at Providence Island, which is also part of Musketia. Back then, it was an English colony. Thereafter, most of these Angolan Africans gradually intermarried with some of the native Miskito people, thus created a new people who were then called Zambos by the Spanish and later also by the English. But beside the creation of a new people, these Africans also brought with them new and stronger ideas of governance, politics, and even warfare, which helped in the forging of what the historian Carl often describes as a syncretic polity that blended Amerindian and African leadership traditions with symbolic conventions of majestic power, that is, the Musketean kingdom. Such was the case that 7 out of 9 Miskito kings were of mixed blood, some to a higher degree than others. This is not to say that there existed no discord whatsoever between the original Miskito people and their descendants, the Zambos, but they also embraced their differences while considering themselves to be a single nation. In 1739, for example, representatives from both Miskito groups signed a treaty as the Miskito Nation, both Zambos and Indians, and another in 1780 as the two tribes of Miskito Indians. Another important point to mention is the input of the white element in the creation of these new people. One of the early and significant waves of the white element came as an official policy of the British Crown in 1743 when the King Most Excellent Majesty in Council approved the recruitment of shoremen to settle the island of Roatán, which back then was a British colony also, or a crown colony, or was in the making to become a crown colony. And British and foreign Protestants were encouraged by the offer of land grants to, quote, contract marriages with Indians, mulattoes, or Negro women, end quote. The result of this can still to this day be found on the Bay Islands, right? Now, when the term Creole was first used in Musketia is not certain, but Charles Napier Bell, who was born in Scotland in 1835 and grew up in Musketia until the age of 22, when his family left in 1857, told us in his book that, quote, the colored people call themselves Creoles, end quote, and after describing their habits, gave us this interesting passage. But we had all shades of color besides the Negroes, brown mulattoes, coffee and milk-colored quadroons, and a few nearly as white as myself. Generations of ship captains had come and gone, leaving families at all the Creole settlements. Each captain, as he succeeded the last, added some more white blood, till the result in my day was that at Bluefields, Pearl Key Lagoon, Boca del Toro, Kern Island, St. Andrew, and Old Providence, which are the other principal settlements of the Creoles, there were some families nearly white, with coffee and milk mothers, brown grandmothers, and black great-grandmothers. One family I knew had all these alive, end quote. But Musketia, though their original birthplace of the Creole people, at least our Creole people, because we know the term Creole is very broad, it applies to many different Creole groups around the world. But at least in our case, Though they originated in Musketia, Musketia was not to be the only homeland of the Creole people. And in the year 1787, after the signing of the Convention of London of 14 July 1786 between England and Spain, with the British agreeing to evacuate the country of the mosquitoes, or mosquito, many Creoles, or colored people in general, were taken to what was to become their new home, which is Belize, or back then, the Bay of Honduras. And now, Deetra will help us to understand what became of these people after the evacuation or even during the evacuation. Thank you.
Heritage Network, thank you so much for the honor of allowing myself and Joshua to present in this year's symposium. This year we're covering Owning Our Culture, Belizean Creole Culture, Bay of Honduras and Musketia. Before I begin, I want to send a special thank you to the archives in Kew, Jamaica, Seville, Merida, and Costa Rica. A special thank you to our local archives department in Belize, specifically Ms. Maria Pulche, in addition to Dr. Melissa Johnson, who's probably one of the most qualified people to discuss Belizean Creole culture on the academic level, as she lives it daily and is married into one of our River Valley families. Dr. Johnson is also the author of Becoming Creole. Now let me give you a little bit of background about myself. For the last 20 years, I've divulged into the archives and vital records, collecting data on our past. I was also grateful to come from a family of historians, one being my great-grandaunt, who ensured I knew who and where I came from while fostering pride of heritage. Shame within many of our cultures has caused many to forget and deny their heritage. Growing up in a Belizean Creole household, it was no secret who we were. The secret remained with the world, who tried to figure out who we were and place us into a restricted category. For many, sharing and knowing our various backgrounds was taboo. Thus why many chose not to discuss who they were publicly or to an audience who seemed not to comprehend the depth and complexities of our heritage. Now, picking up from where Joshua left off, between March and July of 1787, some 2,207 individuals were evacuated from the Mosquito Shore, also known as Musketia, due to the signed July 14th, 1786 Convention of London Treaty. Most of these evacuees shared indigenous Sambu Mosquito ancestry. As Joshua pointed out, this Afro-Indigenous intermarriage was the beginning of Creole culture in the region of the Bay of Honduras and Musketia. Now, those who evacuated in 1787 were not new to Belize. In fact, Belize, then known as the Bay of Honduras, was considered an extension of Musketia. In 1508, Spanish explorers Vicente Yanez Pinzon and Juan Diaz de Solis noted Mosquito in the area of modern-day Belize near the Coxcomb Mountains. In 1634, an established plantation was run by the former governor of Somers Island, Philip Bell, who noted at Placentia Point there were some 600 Puritans, 200 Indians, and 100 slaves. This information is archived with the Winthrop Society, which referenced the area as the Coxcomb Coast Settlement. And those who arrived via the Seaflower ship, the sister ship of the Mayflower, were a part of a negotiated settlement between the Mosquito, the second Earl of Warwick, and the governor, Philip Bell, intended to model the Puritan colony of Massachusetts in a warmer climate. Despite its Puritan agenda, Providence Island and Placentia Point were also trade points for buccaneers who formed an alliance of trade with the Mosquito. Some of the surnames associated with these Caribbean Puritan colonies were Barlett or Barnett, Bowen, Burnell or Burl, Cable or Cadle, Clark, Dixon, Fairweather, Garnett, Goff, Glover, Jones, Lawson, Lockwood, Lamb, Pratt, Smith, Sumner, Wade, Walker, Wilkinson, and Williams. Many of the 1787 evacuees were described as musty, indicating familiar ties to the area long enough to have shared a Zambu indigenous great-grandparent or going back 4 generations. Families such as the Flowers of the Flowers Bank 14, the Crawfords, and the Whites were not new to Belize in 1787. These families were first in the Bay of Honduras, otherwise known as Belize. However, due to constant threat of Spanish invasion and the Spaniards destroying their established works, many sought the stability and safety amongst the Mosquito. In the early morning of September 15, 1779, St. George's Key, also known as Cayo Cocina back then, was raided by the Captaincy General of Guatemala using Commander Joseph Posada of Bacalar. Captured inhabitants were taken to Bacalar, then Merida, before being transported to prison in Havana, Cuba. 5 men who were able to escape the attack swiftly headed to the Mosquito shore to give their account. Upon hearing what happened to the Baymen, the Mosquito wrote, "We should very effectively revenge ourselves and liberate those our friends we might find alive." General Captain Dal Rempel, with 150 Mosquito, proceeded to sail into the Yucatan to locate the imprisoned Baymen. Captain Luttrell reported some 350 Mosquito immediately went into crafts to take the register ships. When the Baymen prisoners were released from Cuba in 1782, many chose to remain within the safety of the Mosquito shore. So who were the Creoles of Belize? Prior to emancipation, the word colored was used to label the people. Some of these colored individuals were sons of the Baymen. However, many of the mothers were Afro-Indigenous women. White Baymen accounted for less than 10% of the population per the 1790 census, and many of them were merchants at sea for the majority of the year. With a population of almost 80% enslaved, most of the slave owners in the Belize settlement were prior enslaved themselves and people of color. The enslaved population didn't just harvest the jungles and forest, they protected the settlement. Many fled into neighboring areas such as the Petén and Yucatan, so much so that the governor of Guatemala complained that Negroes were intermarrying with the native women. By way of Jamaican Barbados, Africans were relocated to Belize. These men and women created the unique culture within Belize known today as Belizean Creole Culture. When their drums were taken away, they found creative ways to create music within labor camps, using utensils such as the grater, spoon, fork, buckets, barrels, donkey jawbone, and later bringing in portable instruments like the mouth organ. This genre of music became known as bruckdown. Although the enslaved were given canned, corned, and salted food rations, many chose to hunt, using organic tools such as the Pocono boy stick for spear fishing and to hunt game meats such as sea turtles and river turtles, gibnut, guana, deer, peccary, and crana. With a combination of African and indigenous knowledge, our Creole elders knew how to cure venomous bites, something the Mosquito were also known for, in addition to bush medicines. Historical Creole areas within Belize, each with something very unique to offer, are Placencia, Monkey River, the Belize River Valley, Ibu Town, Freetown Saboon, and Gales Point. Belizean Creoles who have DNA tested will see that their scientific regions show both Belize and Musketia, many sharing between 10 to 70% indigenous ancestry. Regions of Africa, depending on how long a person can trace their lineage to the area of Belize, reflects Western and Central African countries such as Benin, Mali, Nigeria or Ibu, and Ghana. So to sum it up, Belizean Creole culture, our language, music, and unique foods was created right within Belize from the amalgamation of cultures. As the Garifuna evolved in St. Vincent, so the Belizean Creoles evolved within Belize. For many of us, we have long known who we are and from whom we have come from.